Going
It's
negative.
so funny. Amy, I think when you were here before, it was July. We were probably talking about Joe Biden. The Trump people were talking about how they were going to win. They were measuring the curtains, et cetera, et cetera. I think we all said it's only July. Now we can say it's only August. So it's still early. But again, quoting Churchill for the 18th time, at least it's now sort of the end of the beginning. We're about to get into the full swing of the campaign. You've got new numbers from swing states. What are you finding?
Yeah, you're right. This race has been reset, certainly since May, but even since July when President Biden dropped out. Look, back in May, we saw Biden trailing in all of the swing states, or at best tied. Right now, Harris is either leading or tied with Trump in those swing states. There's one state, Nevada, which she's still trailing in. But overall, if you look at those 7 swing states, Harris is up, again, within the margin, but up 48-47. Biden was down by 3 points. So it's a reset. What's, to me, the most remarkable piece of this poll, and it's what we've been seeing in surveys now that have been coming out in the last week or so, is how little she has been burdened, shall we say, by her association with the administration. She's the sitting vice president, and yet 59% of voters in these swing states think that she is basically the change candidate. She's turning the page from Trump and Biden. She is a generational change, obviously, but they believe that too. And even though Trump is ahead on issues like immigration and the economy, on inflation, obviously the number one issue for so many voters, she's only trailing Trump by 6 points. I think if Biden were in, Biden were in this race, it would be a much bigger margin.
Amy, when you were here last with those polls that showed so much of this race had swung toward Donald Trump, there was, as you know, among Democrats, a sense of almost resignation midsummer of the debate was a disaster. Joe Biden, we love the guy, but he's too old. I'm not going to go vote for Donald Trump, but I think I'm sitting this one out. Is that what this is about?
I think that's exactly what we're seeing, is those voters who were parking themselves in, I'm going to vote for RFK Jr. maybe, or I'm undecided, have now all come back to Democrats. What's interesting, too, is RFK Jr. now is more of a problem for Trump than he is for Harris. Again, many of her voters now coming back to her, but the RFK voter is, just by profile, is somebody who should be or would be more would be more interested in voting for Donald Trump.
So, Amy, is it overstating it to indicate that the movement of voters back toward the vice president who are sitting on the fence or just not thinking about things? Is it a combination of relief and gratitude among voters? Gratitude toward the president for withdrawing, and relief that, as you point out, a sitting vice president of the United States is now someone new?
She's new. And I do think, I do wonder if she weren't a woman, if this weren't as historic as it is, if you would have that level of movement and intensity. Because she literally is, even if you don't know much about politics, you're not following this day to day, you've been hearing and seeing from 2 older white guys for a long time now and being very uninspired by it. And then all of a sudden, here comes this woman who doesn't look or act or sound like anything you've seen before in politics. And suddenly it's like, I'm gonna listen in. So she's getting a benefit of the doubt that is quite remarkable for a sitting vice president.
So, Jamar, what we're seeing here are trends that it's not that Donald Trump is losing support, but rather that Kamala Harris has gained support, reconsolidating, as Amy just said. And I think it's particularly of note as you talk to Democrats, how they feel younger voters coming home and certainly voters of color. And that's just a coalition that she has to build, particularly in the suburbs and the big cities in these battleground states.
Yeah, it feels like folks coming home rather than her moving undecided voters to the Democratic column. And there's obviously a huge difference. Now, in an era of polarization, getting Democrats to come home, getting them motivated is crucial because mobilization matters. I don't think it matters as much as persuasion, but mobilization matters a lot. The key for her is going to be the next phase, which is persuasion, which is moving undecided voters to the Democratic column. Those numbers you guys flashed on the screen for the VP are positive vis-a-vis where Biden was, but they're still challenging for a Democratic candidate for president. Look, it's not ideal to be losing narrowly in Nevada and to basically be tied in Pennsylvania right now, because if you lose those two states, the path to the White House gets really complicated for a Democrat. But obviously, this is a lot better than where they were a few months ago. And also, guys, it's important to point out what she's also done. She stabilized down ballot. Because speaking of Democrats coming home, there were so many House and Senate Democratic candidates who were worried that they were now toast because Biden was so weak on top of the ticket. At the very least now, she's helped stabilize candidates who were looking for volunteers, who were looking for support, looking for contributions, and all that was drying up over the summer. Now, at least, I think a lot of folks down ballot feel better about their chances.
Yeah. In a race like this, a rising tide really does lift all boats. Democrats don't like that. But it really does, and it's exactly what's happening here. Donnie, I was saying that the evidence that young voters were coming home to Democrats was anecdotal before. Now we see the numbers that is happening. I suspect it will continue to happen. But, you know, that was Joe Biden's biggest challenge. As has been pointed out here, it's not that Donald Trump is losing voters. It's that Kamala Harris is picking up voters that were staying away. But younger voters coming home, people of color, voters coming home, women, more women moving to Kamala Harris in her direction. I think especially important, though, even though they don't vote as much as older voters, younger voters, the energy that is now behind Kamala Harris is just so striking. And I say that mainly anecdotally, but there's so many younger voters that were going to sit it out or just had no connection to Joe Biden, but now want to volunteer, that want to go to rallies, that want to make phone calls. It's pretty striking, just the difference a month makes.
Two words, and you guys have talked about it: hope and change. If you look back the last 30 years, when the Democrats have had that enthusiasm, that kind of wave that we're feeling with Bill Clinton. I worked on Bill Clinton's campaign in 1992, did advertising, and of course with Barack Obama, you had that hope and change. Hillary Clinton, you couldn't sell that, and she lost. Joe Biden, he won, he squeaked it out, but there wasn't that enthusiasm. Why? Because you couldn't sell hope and change. When you have that, you're almost unbeatable. That's kind of what you mentioned. Every constituency, young people, people of color, they want hope, they want change. Pretty much everybody wants that. Even if you're happy in your life, you say hope. You want more hope? Yeah. You want more change? Yeah. So that's the thing. That's the wave that's happening, and that's what the Cook Report is saying. That's what all the anecdotal things are saying. So when you have that, as I said, those magical two words, and Donald Trump can stand on his head. There's one thing he can't give you is change, and he certainly can't give you hope. He's going in the opposite direction. So once again, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, hope and change.
And the word you keep hearing at these rallies is joy. People are happy to be there. They're enthusiastic. You can contrast that with Donald Trump on X for 2 hours, with Elon Musk just laying out his grievances. A very different picture there. A number inside your report, Amy, that will hearten the Harris campaign is this independent number, which 3 months ago, Donald Trump, in your analysis, +3. Now Harris +8. That's a huge number.
It is a big movement, and it's a lot of independent women that are coming over and right now supporting Harris. I think, you know, to Jonathan's point, when you look at who those undecided voters are, or people who are still saying, maybe I'll vote third party, they are very cross-pressured on the following. They feel very anxious about the economy. They do feel like inflation is getting worse at a higher level than the overall electorate. they don't like Donald Trump personally. I mean, I feel like we're just we've been rerunning this same playbook now for a long time of voters who say, well, I mean, I kind of liked his policies when he was president. Oh, I don't really like how he acts. And so those voters, how Harris talks to those voters, how she's able to, as Jonathan pointed out, persuade them that she's going to be able to deliver for them. And more important, if Trump can stay on the message about the economy. But again, I feel like we have this conversation over and over again. If only he would stick to a message on the thing that he's actually winning on.
Yeah, that's a lot of people inside the campaign and the Republican Party would like him to do the same thing. He's not. Jay Mort, I want to underline something that you said. I think it's so important for people watching. Yes, these numbers have shifted. Where we are right now, though, if you look at all these numbers, kind of where we were a month ago as far as this race being close. This is still tied. This race is tied right now. Now, it's tied with a slight lean to Harris. A month ago, it was tied and with a slight lean, except in Nevada and North Carolina. If you look at those numbers in May, with a slight lean and all the states that really make a huge difference, it was so it's Harris +2 now in Arizona. It was Trump +1. Tied in Georgia, it was Trump +3. You go down this list, everything except for Nevada and North Carolina. Those are all within the margin of error. This race is tied.
Yeah, Joe, we're in an era of political trench warfare. This is World War I in American politics. Amy mentioned the same conversation that we've all been having for 9 years. Well, yeah, because we're a 51-49 country and Democrats have an advantage. But obviously we have an electoral college, not a popular vote. So it's a toss-up country, and it has been now for the last 3 presidential elections. But Joe, 2 things. First of all, if you look at Georgia and North Carolina in that graphic you just showed, this is important to focus on, too. And it does show the possibility that Kamala Harris could galvanize black voters in a way that we haven't seen since 2012 in American politics. Look at that number there where she obviously has moved numbers in Georgia and North Carolina, both states with significant black populations. Boy, if she can win Georgia and North Carolina, that really, really changes the equation, because obviously it creates less pressure on her to carry all 3 of those states in the Great Lakes.
Campaigns can now use these tools to reach voters very directly. 2, they can have fast and real kind of organic dialogue with more supporters and voters than ways that were ever possible a few decades ago and that were only rudimentary even a few cycles ago, say 2016. 3, campaigns can do this and get the benefits of press without the pressure of journalism. Now, recently, that contrast has been raised about Kamala Harris and when she'll do interviews. But the evidence actually shows a much broader trend on that, which is different than D.C. talking points. Now, those of us in journalism, we definitely think all candidates should take our questions all the time if we could have them do it. But we are going to look at this precisely and as objectively as possible, not just as reporters who want interviews. And the history actually paints a fuller picture. Today's campaigns are using these pages from blueprints of past candidates who used the web to tap and shape enthusiasm. Early experiments by the Dean and McCain campaigns were insurgents in their own parties. They needed to find support beyond elites, so they were more willing to experiment. Obama, the most probably effective digital campaign we've seen, did this with levels. He mixed a compelling story with organizing principles, which he knew about, and a creative online team that actually drew on Howard Dean's example that I mentioned. Fast forward to now. Harris is clearly putting her twist on that. She's got some Obama aides on board. She's getting good headlines on this, and you've probably seen some of the results. Attention, enthusiasm, this fun and sometimes even sort of mocking content online that speaks to how people communicate today and engaging with her own fans' homemade digital content. So I'm going to show you some examples. You can think of these as the political cartoons and yard signs of today, with more people involved in making them, from the memes to the fun videos.
Bless my soul, commanders on a roll, looking like a snack while taking down the Trump patrol. I think the apple's rotten right to
I am running the whole country. Childless cat lady. Meow, meow. Watch out, JD.
This is homemade stuff, what we used to call grassroots. But Harris's team has leaned into it, engaged a dialogue with what the supporters are creating, fueling record-breaking fundraising, and using these tools to route around and even ignore more traditional methods of campaigning. Now, that's a tactic both campaigns have used. I mentioned the calls for Harris to do more interviews faster. She hasn't done one in her first 3 weeks as a nominee, but she's done a lot before this. Republicans are pushing that line to criticize her campaign politics. Now, independent analysts and other reporters may have more good faith reasons to call for those interviews. It's too early to tell probably whether voters care about that, but the data shows most candidates have been stepping back for decades from those older norms. Take this example from the 70s, when most top candidates did regular journalistic interviews.
And now back to Meet the Press, an unrehearsed press conference.
Resuming our interview on Meet the Press, our guests in Boston are Massachusetts senatorial candidates Edward M. Kennedy, Democrat, and Josiah A. Spaulding, Republican.
That was then, and that's what the candidates did. But this is an important prism for now and where we're headed in the next 2 months. They didn't have internet or podcasts or other alternatives there. When they wanted to reach, let alone broadcast to the whole nation, that was the only option. So polls needed those interviews more than today. Even putting Trump and Harris to the side, the history actually shows both parties previously did way more journalistic press conferences, and then they faded over time. In fact, this headline here shows a decline where there used to be dozens of press conferences early on, and now very few across both parties. Now, long before this campaign, Harris has actually experimented with alternative forms of communication. And you can see sort of the reasoning or the strategy. She's done it to humanize herself, especially on the way up when the main thing people knew about her was that she was a prosecutor, and that came with pros and cons and a kind of baggage. She used it to engage in culture and hobbies that might seem authentic. Depends who you ask, but that's how she would share herself. Again, you're not going to cook on Meet the Press. And some of this fits right in with these broader trends for who tends to win the internet. Here are some of her examples from talking to Miley Cyrus to Keke Palmer.
I'm nervous.
Miley!
Hello.
Hi! How are you?
I am honored and kind of a state of disbelief right now that I have you on my live. And
I was about to go off, which would not have been cool, because I'm trying to get elected.
It's a real pleasure to see you. It looks like a lovely kitchen.
You know, we love getting into your fashions, okay? You always get a nice suit, but you're also casual, too, at the same time. We like the Converses. Will we ever get a Madam VP Converse line?
Oh, that's interesting. I do love my Converse.
I mean, you wear them well.
I have all kinds of different colors and high top and low top.
Talking about the Converse shoes. Now, you can call that conversations, you can call it campaigning, you can call it a type of interview. Most of those people wouldn't say that they are full-time national or political journalists, and that's okay. Now, another Harris hobby is cooking, which she has shared again through this different approach to media. And as the saying goes, let her cook.
I don't want to suffer the consequences of our future president not liking my Indian food.
Tell me about your cookbook, because I do have it in front of me.
So what are you doing with the eggs? Okay, I can do whatever you want me to do because I feel now challenged by senators making tuna melts.
Okay, Senator Harris, I say this with respect. You're kind of a show-off. It's like, meanwhile, it's taken me 20 minutes to do this much of ginger.
A pot of water, a couple bay leaves, a little sugar, a little couple peppercorns. You could even do a little slice of orange, something like that. Oh, yes, hi.
Yeah. Okay.
You can do it one-handed.
Yeah.
You're a pro.
Yeah, come on now. Okay.
Come on now, little one-handed egg break, little laughter. Who doesn't like that? Well, there's an answer, as there often is in politics. The answer is her opponents and haters. They don't like that. And this brings us to another way that Harris's fans and this very nascent campaign are flipping the script on MAGA with digital tools and the coconuts. This is honestly one of those admittedly seemingly small things in politics that actually can become a big thing. Small things sometimes matter for various reasons, especially online. Harris's team, as one account put it, is specific to the trend and platform as possible. So they do small things like speaking in Gen Z language or making sure they're not forcing a trend just for the sake of doing it, as one Harris digital aide recently explained. Now, let me give you an example I bet you'll remember, even if you haven't been fixated on all this internet stuff. There have been gaffes as long as there has been mediated politics. Some are unfair, some might seem unavoidable, like how the Dean scream, one moment for Howard Dean on a stage in Iowa, haunted Howard Dean for the rest of that campaign, and many people would say for a while after. Some of these gaffes are actually rooted in deeper problems, like double standards. I've never told you who to vote for, but I can tell you that there were withering, sexist cliches and coverage of Hillary Clinton, fixating on seemingly small things like her laugh, sound familiar, or her outfits, which was different than the treatment of male candidates in both parties. I say that by introduction to the next piece of how the Harris campaign is doing this, because it was actually her critics who tried to mock something seemingly small, how she quoted a saying about coconut trees, and first they pushed it online, but her fans found creative ways to push back, wresting that moment back into something that could be cool or even silly, and repurposing it from the way the right wing had tried to make it a problem for her or somehow disqualifying. And they got all the way to the point that Harris now sometimes sits atop a giant coconut on magazine covers. She's taken it back to be her thing. Her fans use the coconut emoji like their own kind of campaign button. So if you've heard references to this or you've seen some of these clips, I'm going to show you right now that original moment, what she said, and then how some of these recent fan memes have embraced it.
My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context. You could have been getting down to this coconut tree.
That last one is near and dear here on The Beat because you have Taylor Swift remixed with the coconut reference becoming part of the beat of the song. Now, you could argue that's just fun online. You could argue that it has no particular ideology because they're just engaging with something that she was criticized for that tried to sort of quote her or turn that into a problem or a gaffe, and they took it back. But as I mentioned, you could also see other layering beneath that. Having lived through the degradation of other women candidates, women in public life and public officials, especially about the small things or the style things or the laughter things, you got a whole lot of people here who are empowered, who are good at this, and they're talking back. And the Harris campaign, if nothing else, is adaptive enough or smart enough to listen and engage it. Now, that last clip I showed among those memes had a Taylor Swift nod, as I mentioned. Does any of that actually help you go towards November to beat former President Trump? Republicans seem to think so. They have been openly panicking about the idea that Swift would endorse or help Democrats at all, pushing conspiracy theories, attacking her. A surefire sign that they get that this matters. Remember what I told you about Donald Trump? Publicity, TV obsessed. This is the new TV in some sense, and he and his team understand exactly how it works and why it can be so effective.
Von Hilliard, you are at a Trump rally that they're not calling a rally because it's not the size of a rally, and it seems they don't want their rally to be compared to the size of the Harris-Walz rallies. But tell me what this event is. Is it people in a venue with a podium in the middle and remarks planned?
Nicole, this event is being billed by the campaign as an economic address. It's not a rally, despite it looking like one. I just want to be clear. The campaign has structured events like this frequently over the years, right? The campaign sometimes has one idea of a theme, but then so often Donald Trump, he may refer to a few lines, in this instance about the economy, but then, as he so often does, go off a script here. This one is being billed as an economic address, frankly, after 3 weeks in which Donald Trump and his campaign have lacked a theme, have lacked focus. You heard Nikki Haley there bemoan the fact, but it's not just Nikki Haley. It's strong Donald Trump acolytes, those who have been ride or die with him through the years, including in these last months, who have been, I would say, gloomy over the prospects of this campaign, acknowledging that not only has Donald Trump suggested that the crowd size for Kamala Harris has been fake or questioned her race, but also even the message that he has attempted to deliver on policy and substance has been fraught and difficult. If you just take the economy, right? You have inflation here that is under 3% now. Compare that in 2022, when in October, right before those midterm elections, Republicans were largely running on this same message. At the time, inflation was 7.5 percentage points. If you look at the border crisis, right, there was a record number of migrants who were crossing into the United States in October of 22. Compare that to what is in place right here in the summer of 2024. It is a record low during the Biden administration for the number of border encounters by the Border and Patrol. And so this, for the Trump campaign, is coming at a time, another example, violent crime. We have seen year over year violent crime, homicides drop in major American cities here. So for Donald Trump, it is not just a contrast in terms of the visuals between the Harris campaign and his campaign, but also on policy, which his own team wants him to get back to. Right now, this is a difficult time because he wants to put the focus on the Biden-Harris administration, yet some of the numbers and some of the messaging that he wanted to run on here in these final 3 months are facing difficult numbers and difficult realities based off of pure statistics at this point.
It's so interesting, Vaughn, because what is covered is that his advisors and his allies want him to get back to policy. But what you're reporting and what the data bears out is that on the issues where he feels like he has an advantage, the facts don't line up the way they might have at another point in time. What's Plan C?
I think it's a good question, Nicole, because let's be very clear. This campaign infrastructure that he has surrounded himself with, Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, Jason Miller, these are key campaign advisors that have allowed him to run on whatever message he has chosen to run on. Sometimes that means even standing on stage as January 6th defendants sing the Star-Spangled Banner, right? It has meant calling those individuals patriots, right? It has allowed him to bemoan the state of the migrant crisis and the number of migrants that are coming into the United States and that they're stealing your jobs. They're coming from insane asylums. They have allowed Donald Trump to run his own campaign messaging for the better part of almost 2 years now. And up until this point, it won him a Republican primary, and up against Joe Biden, it had him leading in polling in battleground states. But that's not the race he's running against now. And I think that is what all of us that are reporting on Donald Trump are looking at, but also those who are allied with him. I was just talking with somebody who is connected to that world who was questioning where do they go from here, because they could very well try to fire one of the key campaign advisors. But what does that do them? Because organizationally, infrastructure-wise, they have implemented what Donald Trump wanted in terms of a ground game operation, in terms of a focus on election integrity and putting resources towards being able to challenge election laws and potentially in the weeks after the election, challenge, voting tabulation. And so right now, this campaign, they have done what Donald Trump has wanted. And I think it is a question now, where does Donald Trump want his where does he want him to go? And I think this last week is an indication. And it's a question is, could anybody, Kellyanne Conway, could somebody get into his ear at this point and convince him that there is a different path forward?
Matt Dowd, I come to you because I'm wondering how much that matters, right? I mean, it looks like there's been a structural reshaping of the race, and a lot of the myths that were unchallenged are being challenged aggressively all day, every day, including on Fox News. I mean, Nikki Haley is someone who speaks to former Trump voters. Let me play, or I'm going to read it, actually. She says, don't assume people are going to bend the knee, that 20% Their ideas are still out. What they like about Kamala is that she's being hopeful. She's talking about a way forward. They don't want a former president talking about the past. You've now got permission structures from evangelical Americans, from thousands, tens of thousands of Republicans who are saying voting for Kamala Harris isn't a Democratic or Republican decision. It's a patriotic decision. Let me play Georgia's former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan making that argument.
And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves, just because we vote for Kamala Harris in 2024 doesn't mean we are Democrats. It just means we are patriots. What story do you want to tell your kids and grandkids? Do you want to tell them when they ask about this election, when they ask about this chaotic period of time, this temporary moment of insanity for the Republican Party, do you want to tell them that you voted for a morally bankrupt person, a womanizer, an indicted felon, a convicted felon, just because he had an R next to his name? Or do you want to tell them that you had the courage to vote for somebody that was morally decent, that was a steadier hand, that you disagreed with on a handful of policies? I hope that answers that you had the courage to vote for somebody that is decent.
Matt Dowd.
You know, I think this is an important conversation because I think the thing that has not been talked about enough is the actual psychic shift of this race in a fundamental way that seldom happens in politics, even especially this close to Election Day. What happened a few weeks ago is Joe Biden stepped back and then pushed and then said he endorsed Kamala Harris in this race. That was like him stepping on the fault line of our politics, and the tectonic plates fundamentally moved. And when those tectonic plates moved, what happened is the facts that were on the ground began to line up with people's feelings, because what held back the Democratic ticket wasn't the facts. The facts were always there. It's how people felt. And for some reason, this psychic shift from Joe Biden, where people felt sour, where people didn't feel right, where people begrudgingly said, I'm going to do that, I'm going to vote for that, all of a sudden changed. And what happened dramatically, Vice President Harris's numbers, favorability numbers, have improved by 20 points in 3 weeks. 20-point improvements in her favorability numbers. How people feel, who judges best, who works best on the economy, has went from a dramatic advantage of Donald Trump to basically even today. And that's a fundamental shift. And how people feel optimistic and hopeful about the direction of America has fundamentally changed. And so people have argued the facts now for months and months and months and months, and the public seemed to be impervious to the facts. But all of a sudden now they're no longer impervious, because their feelings of the race has fundamentally changed. And that's the problem that Donald Trump and his campaign have. And I, struggling through this as a strategist, just to sort of, put it up and see how you can fix this, it's very hard to fix it when there's been that psychic of a shift in a race.
Matt, with that said, take me through how you see the data that's out today. The new data is the Cook Political Report. And then I think yesterday or earlier this week, we had the new New York Times polling, which puts her ahead in most of the battleground states. So
my view of the data right now is they're actually underestimating Vice President Harris's support. The Cook Political Report data came out of the field August 2nd. The data was out 12 days ago. So it hasn't been in the field. It was gone 2 weeks ago. And so to me, the last 10 days have only improved the vice president's position. There is a Monmouth poll out in the last 2 hours, a national poll, that had the race as close, as right on as anybody in 2020. They had Joe Biden winning the race in 2020 by 5 points. He won it by 4.5. As of today, the vice president has a 5-point lead nationally in this race, in a very A-plus polling firm in the course of this. And so I think when we discuss the Cook Political Report and the New York Times Political Report and all that, all good news, but I don't think it's near as good news as what I actually think reality is today. And that's why I think you're seeing the aggression. That's why I think you're seeing the floundering by Donald Trump and his campaign. That's why you're seeing the discussion of, they know this data that I'm telling you. They don't think it's a 1-point race anymore or a 2-point race. They know it's a 4 or 5-point race as of today.
The basic equation for a Democratic presidential victory this year is not rocket science, right? It's pretty much just do what they did in 2020 when President Joe Biden won by more than 7 million votes nationwide, representing 4.5 percentage points and 306 electoral votes to Trump's 232. And what the polling showed over the first 6 months or so of this year was that winning formula, the 2020 coalition that had beaten Donald Trump, had started to erode. Biden was not hitting his numbers with several Democratic groups that had supported him in 2020, and Trump was outright winning at least some of them. Now, crucially, Trump also had leads in just about all the battleground states, which is where the elections won or lost, thanks to the Electoral College, and some of those leads were fairly substantial. If you take a look at this Cook Political Report swing state survey back in May, where they polled folks in those states, Trump was up or breaking even against Biden basically everywhere: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada, where he's up by a whopping 9 points. But look at Cook's latest swing state numbers. Same poll, same states. Vice President Kamala Harris has pulled the polling in her direction in every state, taking the lead in 5 of them, even clipping Trump's lead by 6 points in Nevada, which has been the strongest state in this poll, according to the May survey. All these polls, both from May and August, are, let's be clear, very close within the margin of error. But if you look at that data, it does seem to represent a real shift in the race, something we're seeing in other polling as well. Dave Wasserman is a senior editor and elections analyst with the Cook Political Report. He helped oversee this polling. Tatish Inteta is a professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, also serves as the polling director there, and they both join me now. Dave, let me just ask you for the sort of top-line apple-to-apple comparison. You've got the same poll run a few months apart by the same folks in the same states, post the change in the Democratic nominee, and we see something that aligns with most of the data that I've been seeing. What's your take?
Well, you don't need our battery of swing state polls to tell that Kamala Harris has far more paths to 270 electoral votes than Joe Biden did. But the biggest difference that stood out to me between our same polls in May and what we just conducted was that among lower engagement voters. Back in May, there was a yawning divide between the voters who were 4 out of 4 in the past 4 federal elections, so showed up to vote in 16, 18, 20, and 22. They supported Joe Biden 49 to 45. Trump was ahead among everyone else 51 to 41. Look at this poll, and Kamala Harris is still up 4 with those highest engagement voters who have the highest levels of civic and institutional trust, up 50 to 46, but she's closed the gap among the lower engagement cohort to just 3 points, 48-45, Trump lead. And what that tells me is that Kamala Harris is a far better pop culture candidate than Joe Biden. She has a lot of strengths on social media and is doing better among younger voters, doing better among peripherally engaged voters of color. And that is the key to closing this gap. And it's produced a very, very close race.
That's such a great point because, Tatish, I've been talking about it as these sort of bullseye with concentric circles. In the middle of the bullseye, and again, I think we've seen this through all the data, let's say before when it was Biden, is like in the center of the bullseye, there's people who vote just like every election. We're talking like it's mid-August and it's a special primary, right? And they're just out there. And those folks are like the most plus, Biden plus 10, plus 12, right? We see it in Democratic overperformance in those special elections, low turnout. And then it's people who vote in, all of the midterms and all the local elections, and it's people who just vote in presidentials, and it's people who are registered, might not have people not registered. And as you moved out of the circles, Biden was doing worse and worse and worse. What does the polling picture look like to you in terms of that drop off and what Harris does there?
Yeah, I think the key factor here is that Harris has sort of injected energy into the Democratic coalition, and in particular, the Obama coalition of young people, as Dave said, people of color, but also of women. And you're seeing sort of substantial increases in the level of support for the Democratic candidate, in this case, Kamala Harris, relative to Biden amongst these groups who historically, particularly as it pertains to young people and people of color, have been lower engagement voters. And so I think what we're seeing is what a number of, Democratic donors, a number of prominent elected Democratic officials had said is that, Joe Biden wasn't able to mobilize and to create the energy and enthusiasm amongst the voters that are necessary in order to win a national election.
It's funny, too, because, as long as I've been covering politics, Dave, and this goes all the way back to Gingrich's, enormous midterm victory in 94, right? It tended to be flipped. It was certainly true in 94, certainly true in 2010, that the Republican Party had the sort of like, we vote in every election coalition. The Democratic Party had more infrequent voters, had to turn them out. And it's interesting to me that in your polling, I want to talk about the likely voter screen, Dave. So you guys do some sort of likely voter screening, you try to model or ask how likely people are to vote. And there you see Harris winning by 6 in Pennsylvania, by 5 in Wisconsin, up 5 in Nevada, which is fascinating, if I'm not mistaken. Or do I have that right? No, sorry, that's the swings. That's among likely voters. There it is. Thank you. And that includes third parties. So we're still seeing that here, right? I mean, that's still showing up in the data for you guys.
Yeah, this is all likely voters, to be clear, Chris. But what we did notice was that including third parties expanded Harris's lead. And so
that's what it
tells you is that RFK Jr. has collapsed, but some of that third party support, including his, has gone to her, which validates the theory that he has basically been a parking place for dissatisfaction among younger voters with the geriatric showdown that existed for the first half of the year. Now, Kamala Harris has benefited from just about as favorable a news environment as you can imagine over the course of the past couple weeks. But the key, I think, to sustaining the momentum we're seeing for her will be whether she can seize the center. And there are some warning signs for her in this poll. 53% of voters in these battleground states agreed with the statement that she's too liberal to govern the country effectively. So she needs to blunt that. And the biggest weakness for Trump, obviously, 57% of voters believe he's too erratic and out of control to govern the country effectively. So the candidate who can best assuage those concerns will win.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they have the DNC, right? They have this sort of remarkable canvas to deal with. Tatish, you did some really interesting polling on Project 2025, which I want to talk on, which is sort of in this different category, right? So the top line is, as Dave was talking about, the sort of pop culture phenomenon of Harris. One of the things we've also seen is the pop culture phenomenon of Project 2025. And quickly, what's your sort of top line on what you learned from that polling?
Yeah, so the central thing that we found is that Americans are well aware of Project 2025. 51% of Americans indicated that they've heard some or a lot of Project 2025. And then secondarily, it's extremely unpopular. The policies associated with Project 2025, most notably firing civil servants for political appointees that are loyal to the president. Majorities oppose that. Majorities oppose restricting contraception to women. Majorities oppose the elimination of the Department of Education. So the policies associated with this particular set of this sort of Republican playbook are extremely unpopular, even amongst Trump voters. We see majorities opposed to these policies. And the more you know about Project 2025, that's associated with lower support for Donald Trump. So it's no surprise that he's attempted to distance himself from Project 2025, given the overwhelming unpopularity of the policies that make up this playbook.
I will note that the shutting down social media companies and websites over pornography has plurality support, which was surprising and an interesting wrinkle in the data. We'll come back to that. Dave Wasserman, Tatish and Teda, thank you both.
There are signs that enthusiasm for Kamala Harris is building in the states that will decide the election. New polling from the Cook Political Report shows the vice president leading or tied with Donald Trump in 6 of 7 battleground states. Still within the margin of error here, but this reflects a significant shift. And the New York Times reports that new voter registration data in 2 swing states adds to the evidence that Harris's candidacy has energized potential Democratic voters. This comes as the campaign's trying to capitalize on this enthusiasm with the announcement of what the DNC is calling a Dempalooza, public events in Chicago during convention week next week that offer a chance for Democrats to hear from party leaders without having to be in the convention hall. And while they're at it, they can get friendship bracelets or a Kamala Harris manicure. Back with us to discuss, Tim Miller and Robbie Mook. So, Tim, what's your takeaway from this new battleground polling? How significant is it?
I'm kind of interested in the manicure, but the battleground
I wanted to make a comment on that. I held back.
Yeah. The battleground poll obviously looks good for her, and it's a couple weeks out of date, and the numbers are moving her direction. They released it today, but they took the poll a couple weeks ago. And so, look, I think that there's going to be more good polls coming up for her. I don't think this is surprising. Like what we've seen both in the polling side and on the enthusiasm side is exactly what every poll that has been taken all year told us, which was that voters weren't excited about their choices. When Joe Biden stepped aside, Kamala Harris stepped in, and she brought a lot of enthusiasm with her. She brought a lot of excitement with her. I think in addition to the excitement from the base, which we've seen at these events, these huge rallies that are now outdrawing Trump, the other thing in that Cook poll you just showed that I thought was interesting was that group that we talked about all year, the double haters, the voters that didn't like Trump or Biden. Well, right now, they're going for Kamala Harris 54-24. So she's already got about half of these voters, that were the key swing voters, before the debate last month. So I think that's, shouldn't be a surprise that the numbers are showing what they are.
Robbie, the New York Times reports that after President Biden got out of the race, weekly Democratic registrations outnumbered Republican registrations in North Carolina and in Pennsylvania. It was the largest Democratic margin in new registrations since late 2023. What does that tell you?
Yeah, well, on the ground, you could just feel it. I know here in my own community, I was at the local Democrats meeting a week ago, and it was the biggest turnout I'd ever seen. The parking lot was full. I couldn't find a place to park. And I think just, when you're walking around talking to people right now, there's an excitement that just wasn't there. So, and I think it will continue. I think it'll continue this week. I think it'll continue through the convention. And then this race will get a little bit harder. Harris has said she's going to start to do interviews. The debate will come up. So I think what's important for the campaign right now is to galvanize, calcify, harden all this support, mobilize people to volunteer, but anticipate that it will get tighter. And, these polls are, as Tim was saying, they're expected, they're very welcome news, but what it all adds up to at the end of the day is a race that looks very similar to 2020. And 2020 felt really good if you look at the Electoral College numbers, but the upper Midwest and Arizona and Georgia, these were very close contests. And the data you're showing now, it's a close contest out there. So I think we need to continue to keep our nose to the grindstone. We're not running away from this. We're just getting it back to a dead heat.
Okay, discussion to be continued. We'll see if there's any more movement as we move forward in this election cycle. Tim Miller, Robbie Mook, thank you both for sticking with us through the hour.